We begin the new week having just watched yet another incident of violence close to President Trump, following last night's shooting incident outside the White House that left the shooter dead and at least one person injured. Meanwhile, soaring prices, gas prices from Trump's Iran war have had his approval ratings plummeting. But rather than try to salvage his domestic policy or his rapport with voters, he's basking in his public love affair with his vanity ballroom project and using last night's violence to screech about its necessity. After even Senate Republicans said no to his taxpayer money for it. But what appears to have many of them at an utter loss tonight is his $1.8 billion slush fund for convicted extremists and white supremacists, teasing a rare break with the president that could deepen when midterms, barely 5 months away, transpire. All of this and more on this Sunday edition of Politics Nation. Joining me now is Congressman Glenn Ivey, Democrat of Maryland. Starting with a quick response, I want to start with you, Congressman, with a quick response to last night's shooting outside the White House. Tonight, the president and his enablers are using the incident to boost his call for public funding of his secured White House ballroom. The rest of us are just asking when this growing political violence is going to end and hoping it's long before this next election. What's your reaction, Congressman Ivey?
Well, certainly it was tragic. You know, their lives were lost last night, but this certainly doesn't justify the ballroom. Now, keep in mind, he said initially that there were going to be private donations that covered the payments for the ballroom. Now he wants $1 billion of American taxpayer dollars to cover it. And in addition to that, you got to keep in mind that most of the events that presidents do, or many of them anyway, either are not at the White House or cannot be at the White House. If they're campaign events, you can't do them at the White House. They can't be on government property. The big issue is gun control on this and trying to figure out how to go after these lone wolf shooters, which we continue to have problems with. The ballroom would be, at best, a Band-Aid on something that needs major surgery here in the United States. So nice try, but I think he's still going to have trouble getting that $1 billion to cover the ballroom, and rightly so.
Now, pivoting to the president's anti-weaponization fund for his cronies and foot soldiers, it looks like it's going to be a hard sell for him to make, even to his supporters in Congress who just chose to punt on a budget reconciliation vote rather than sign off on nearly $2 billion of taxpayer money going to people who assaulted cops and broke into the U.S. Capitol. And we're seeing reports that convicted members of extremist groups like the Proud Boys are expecting to see as high as 8-figure paydays from the fund. How is this landing with your constituents, Congressman?
It's shocking. I think, I was at an event last night, it was an 8th grade graduation event, and the parents were just like, can he do this? This is incredible. Never seen anything like this. And one of the parents I was talking to was a Department of Justice attorney. It's really tragic the way he's tried to turn the Department of Justice into a department of retaliation overall. But in this instance, he's trying to make it so that the Department of Justice and the IRS sign off on his payoffs for his cronies, as you mentioned, many of whom were the insurrectionists who attacked police officers and tried to block the peaceful transfer of power. But I think, there are going to be efforts to make sure that on the legislative front, either you claw back the money, you block the money from being sent over to start with. I think there are going to be challenges. There have already been lawsuits filed about it, too. So there'll be challenges in court. I don't think it's going to happen because I think even the Senate and House Republicans know, secretly at least, and some publicly, that this smells to high heaven and the public won't accept it.
Now, let's turn now to Maryland, where Democrats are reconsidering redistricting following the Supreme Court's Louisiana decision and the current gerrymandering frenzy here in the South. Your state Senate president says, quote, "The rules have changed," end of quote, after he previously resisted redistricting over fears of legal fights with Republicans. Now he's calling for a special session, and Governor Wes Moore is pushing for a map that excises the Maryland's lone Republican leaning district. Are you in favor of the move, Congressman?
Absolutely. I think it makes sense to fight fire with fire. And I felt that way before the Voting Rights Act was gutted by the Trump Supreme Court, and even more so after the Virginia State Supreme Court and that atrocious ruling that threw out a democratically, democratically chosen set of lines there in Virginia. So I'm hoping that we can move forward with the same type of effort here to redraw these lines and make sure that we're trying to keep some kind of balance. The reason we're not in the majority now in the House from a Democratic standpoint is because the Republicans did this in North Carolina 2 years ago and redrew 3 Democrats out of their seats. Now they're trying to do the same thing because I think they know they're in deep trouble. Given Trump's numbers, he's underwater, for the economy, for the tariffs, for the gas prices, you name it. He's done it all wrong. They're trying to figure out how to save themselves, but we can't let them cheat us out of this election.
Tomorrow marks the 6th anniversary of George Floyd's murder, Congressman. 6 years. As you know, I was on the forefront of that as you were legislatively. There's no meaningful police reform passing Congress in that time, despite a historic outcry following his murder. Last year, you reintroduced the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and we're months out from a midterm election expected to give Democrats back the House. Can we expect to see police reform reprioritized if that happens?
Yeah, I think it's going to take the Democrats taking the House back to actually put this on the front burner again. We're trying to push it now, though, because we can't let the Trump administration set our agenda. And I think it's important to make sure we have the Republicans on record. If they're going to try and block this, the voters need to know that and hold them accountable. And I think the voters are paying even more attention to this type of force being used in the wake of what happened in Minneapolis, the killing of Good and Preddy, which, the Department of Justice is blocking evidence going from the feds to the state and local prosecutors. So, if they want to move forward with the prosecution, they can. But the Department of Justice has circled the wagons and tried to protect these guys. So the only way to make sure we get justice is to make sure we pass this kind of legislation that will hold police who cross the line accountable. And we're going to keep fighting until we get it done.
All right. My last question I must ask you, Congressman. A judge has dropped the criminal case against Kilmar Brago Garcia, the Maryland man who is your constituent and who was illegally deported to El Salvador last year and was then charged with human smuggling after challenging his deportation with the Trump administration. Your reaction to this case?
Every time he can get into court in front of a judge, he beats the Trump administration. And I think that's why they keep coming after him. And that's why the judge looked at this and said, this looks like vindictive prosecution and should not go forward. Now, the Trump administration's already announced they're going to appeal the judge's ruling. So, the vindictiveness continues. But this is just another aspect of this. They've gone after Letitia James and James Comey and all these other people that Trump has decided are his enemies. He's abusing what the Department of Justice ought to be. It should be a Department of Justice, not a Department of Retribution. He's really destroying the reputation and the long history that DOJ enjoyed, and it's going to hurt us in the long run.
All right. Thank you, Congressman Ivey of Maryland. Joining me now, 2 Democratic candidates who won big primaries in red states last week. Doug Jones, former U.S. Senator and current candidate for Alabama governor, and Charles Booker, former Kentucky state representative and now candidate for the U.S. Senate in Kentucky. Charles, let's start with you. Congratulations. You're the Democratic nominee up against Congressman Andy Barr to fill Mitch McConnell's Senate seat for Kentucky. Now, this is not your first time running for Senate. Why do you think this third run will be more successful than the other two?
Well, Reverend, it's good to be with you as always, sir. And you're right. This is my third run. I've told folks this feels like Rocky III. We've been building something over the years that is truly incredible. One of the broadest coalitions in modern political history, organizing people from the hood to the holler, literally. Folks who voted for Trump, people who never voted before, young people, they're all inspired for our campaign. And it's because this message is meeting their needs at a time when we're hurting. We're looking for real change, and they're looking for leaders who will stand up and fight for them. And I've earned trust over the years. And with this being an open seat, after Mitch McConnell has screwed us over my entire life, we now have a chance to replace him with a fighter for working people. And we're not going to miss this moment. And I'm urging everyone to join us in this race and go to charlesbooker.org. Let's flip this seat and flip the Senate.
Now, Doug, you know your opponent well, Senator Tommy Tuberville. You've been up against him before, and of course in 2020. How is this race for governor? How is this different this time? What is your biggest challenge?
Well, the biggest challenge is history and expectations. I think every Democrat in the South runs against that. But what's different this time is a couple of things. Number one, it's a different race. This is not the U.S. Senate. This is a governor's race, and that makes a big difference in terms of how people view the candidates. And second of all, and this is probably the most important, is that Tommy Tuberville has a record now, and he's not got a very good record on delivering things for the people of Alabama. He delivers a lot for Donald Trump, but he doesn't deliver a lot for the people of Alabama, and nothing that he is saying right now is going to deliver anything. It's not about health care. It's not about electricity prices. It's not about gas prices. None of those programs is hitting home with the folks that voted for him the last time. So I think that gives us a real opportunity. The times are different, Rev, as everybody is seeing. There's an optimism for folks that are not just Democrats, but also independents and moderate Republicans, an optimism for change, that we can change the direction of this state and the country.
Now, Charles, your opponent, Andy Barr, has a campaign ad in which he blasts diversity initiatives and declares, quote, "It's not a sin to be white," end of quote. What do you make of that statement and the role race is playing in this Kentucky contest?
Well, I'll say with my opponent, it's clear the bar is very low. And we're tired of the hate. We're tired of the racism. We're tired of the bigotry. They're trying to sow division as a way to hoard power. We know that playbook. You've taught us over the years, Reverend, what it looks like to stand in the face of that type of hate. And what I'm here to say now is Kentucky is ready to move forward. We've been screwed over by Mitch McConnell literally my entire life. The man was elected when I was 2 weeks old, and Andy Barr wants to be the reincarnate of that same corruption, and we're done with that. No one should have to ration their insulin in the wealthiest country in the world. No one should have to sleep on the streets. The government we pay for should work for us. That's my message. And whether you're Democrat, Republican, or independent, this campaign is for you. And we're not leaning into the wedge issues. We're running to unity. We're running to community because together we know we're stronger. And that's why we're in a position to win this race. And I'm proud to stand with the people of Kentucky and against that type of bigotry.
Well, what do you mean by screwed?
You know, Kentucky has been one of the poorest states in the country, one of the sickest states in the country. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I often mention that I've had to ration my insulin to get groceries to feed my girls. And a lot of Kentuckians know that story. We've seen jobs leave and never come back. People that are turning their faucet on and the water that comes out, they can't drink it if they can even afford the utilities. And meanwhile, we've seen Mitch McConnell get wealthy, fund endless war, and essentially sell us out over and over again. And that's why so many Kentuckians are sick and tired of that. And they're looking for real change. There are a lot of people who voted for Trump because he said he would drain the swamp. He said he would bring jobs back. He said he would make life more affordable. And of course, he is the swamp. But we still need that change. And I'm fighting for it. And the people of Kentucky know it. And that's why they're standing with me.
Doug, Alabama is yet another state that has been thrown into turmoil over redistricting of late. On Friday, a federal court heard a dispute over two different congressional maps, one of which was drawn by Republicans and found by a court to likely violate the Voting Rights Act. How do you see this playing out, and what are the stakes for Alabama?
Well, the stakes are huge, and listening to Charles, it's almost like it's a mirror image of what's going on in Alabama and really the rest of the South. I think the stakes are huge for all of the southern states, but particularly a state like Alabama. I really believe that there is still a chance with the courts that Alabama continues with the maps that we have now, that they're going to enjoin the use of the statewide maps. But, you know, Reb, I got to tell you, this has gotten folks. They've got folks now ready for change, ready to vote. They don't want to go back to the era of the time in the 1960s when folks had a hard time being represented, a hard time being getting votes to be counted. They don't want that anymore. They don't want to go back. I think that's true in Alabama. I think it's true in South Carolina and all of the other southern states. So we're going to move forward. And I think you just look at the numbers that we had. We overperformed in our primary this week, and Republicans underperformed significantly, down 25% from just 4 years ago with hotly contested races. That's what's at stake. It's the future of our states, of our region.
Now, one final question. I'm out of time, but I want to ask you both to respond quickly to this, because it's not just Alabama. Today in South Carolina, state senators are debating today a new congressional district map. It's the first meeting on a Sunday in 40 years, and early voting starts on Tuesday. Some 12,000 early ballots have apparently been submitted already. Doug, to you first, how urgent is this matter of gerrymandering and redistricting that we're seeing all over the country? And then you, Charles.
Well, it's urgent to some people because they know they're losing. I think Charles said that earlier too, and you've alluded to it, Red. They know that there are going to have problems in this election. They've never called a special election in Alabama to expand Medicaid, to deal with electricity prices, to deal with gas prices, to deal with farmers who are losing their markets to tariff wars. So it's an urgency for some folks because they are losing their grip on the electorate. And this is the only way that they can try to maintain it.
Charles?
Well, I just want to echo that. I mean, we are seeing democracy being ripped apart in our face, the pursuit of democracy. And if you thought our votes didn't matter, why would they be trying so hard to silence the American people? And look, the gutting of the Voting Rights Act is brought to you by Mitch McConnell. So for anyone who is wondering whether this race is important, look at what's happening now. We have to win in places like Kentucky. We have to codify the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We have to stand up for democracy. And I know that the people of Kentucky are ready. People across the country are ready. We're seeing Democratic wins across the board. There's a strong bench of people ready to fight back. Roy Cooper in North Carolina, Keisha Lance Bottoms in Georgia, and Doug Jones, you've even shown it yourself, sir. Winning in a red state as a Democrat and being the nominee now. We're ready for change, and we have to get it.
All right, Doug Jones and Charles Booker, thank you both for being with us. Coming up, Texas is setting up for a showdown this week as the GOP primary pits MAGA against committed conservatives. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Politics Nation on MS Now. Now let's turn to Texas, where voters will head to the polls on Tuesday for the primary runoff elections to decide several remaining races after no candidate secured the required majority earlier in March. Joining me now is Kurt Bardella, former Republican strategist and publisher of the Watchdog Report on Substack. Kurt, Tuesday's primary is bound to sell a number of remaining races in Texas, especially the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate between incumbent Senator John Cornyn and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, where the winner will face Democratic candidate James Tallarico in November. But President Trump has endorsed Paxton, and Senator Cornyn said today that he would not commit to backing him if he lost on Tuesday. Why is this race so critical, and what are you hearing there in Texas?
Well, you know, Rev, from the moment that there was the primary that was going to have this runoff between Cornyn and Ken Paxton, the conventional wisdom was that the only real viable path for Democrats to potentially swing Texas their way is this perfect storm of a longer runoff, meaning no one is laying a glove on James Tallarico. He's able to just raise money and not have any negatives against him right now. Cornyn and Paxton just pummeling each other with millions of dollars on the airwaves, driving up their negatives, and ultimately a very flawed nominee in Ken Paxton, someone who his own party wanted to impeach as Attorney General of the state of Texas. His own party didn't believe he was of the standard that he should hold public office. They wanted to depose him. That's the guy that limps forward in the general. You know, John Cornyn would have been very tough, I think. The voters that would have either been turned off and repelled by Ken Paxton, they would have shown up for John Cornyn. The voters who have been voting for John Cornyn for decades here in Texas, who think of him as a strong, conservative, reliable, consistent voice to the Republican Party, they would have showed up for John Cornyn. Those people are turned off, and now they're left with the choice of either just abandoning Ken Paxton for an unthinkable moderate Democrat like James Tallarico, or just not showing up and voting at all. Either way, it's the perfect confluence of events that needs to happen for Democrats to have a viable chance at flipping Texas.
Now, this Texas primary between Cornyn and Paxton has broken records to become one of the most expensive in history, with over $122 million allocated to advertising alone. With this amount of money spent on a primary within party lines, why is this race so competitive for the GOP? And how will Tuesday's outcome change the calculus of the race for the general election?
Well, it really just goes to show how Trump's absolute, demand of 100% fealty has really injured his Republican Party. Republicans are spending $100 million in a primary to replace John Cornyn with someone whose voting record in the U.S. Senate will likely mirror his. It's not like John Cornyn has been some moderate squish who votes 50-50 with Republicans. He's about as reliable of a conservative vote that you can have. When you are a party that's willing to just spend unlimited amounts of resources replacing your own with people who won't vote very differently, it begs the question, what are you really doing here? And then, oh, by the way, if you even want to hold on to Texas, every single dollar you spend here in a general election could have been spent way more wisely and gone much further in places like Georgia, Ohio, Michigan, Alaska, Maine, a lot of the competitive seats that we have. Texas is a very expensive place to play. It's huge. Major media markets, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin. So it's good money out after bad. They're going to spend more money than they would have had to. And every dollar spent here, it's an opportunity cost, Rev. It's money they could have spent holding on to other seats that they may very well lose.
Many Trump-endorsed candidates have been winning the primary races across the country in Senate, House, and state legislative races so far in 2026. But at the same time, his approval rankings are sinking as Americans continue to report plummeting confidence in the economy. Will Trump's documented unpopularity hurt him in the general election in November?
Well, absolutely. And again, if Donald Trump were really as powerful as he thinks he is, he would have actually endorsed John Cornyn and swung the race John Cornyn's way. The fact that he waited to the 11th hour to get behind Ken Paxton, who was probably always going to already win the runoff anyway, shows you that Donald Trump isn't as strong as he'd like to have you believe. And ultimately, these negatives, because of high gas prices, a war that nobody wanted, the cost of living going up, child care costs going up, people being asked to do more with less over and over and over again, which completely betray the promises that Donald Trump Republicans led the American people to believe in 2024. It was going to be a booming economy, a great economy, the greatest economy of all time. Gas prices are going to be an all-time low. No more foreign wars. All those promises are broken. All those people are disenchanted. You look at here in Texas particularly, the reason why the Latino vote is swinging so far away from Donald Trump and Republicans, which they had in 2024, and now swinging back the other way, is because all those promises have been broken. They have a real problem here in Texas with the Latino vote. You talk to people like Chuck Rocha and Mike Madrid, respected constituencies, consultants who have the pulse on the Latino vote more than anyone in national politics, and they will tell you what's going on here in Texas is also going on nationwide. Latinos are abandoning the Republican Party because they were lied to.
Now, to clarify something you said earlier, if you are the Democratic nominee, James Tallarico, would you prefer to run against Cornyn or Paxton?
Oh, Ken Paxton, hands down. Again, Cornyn isn't someone that you're afraid of. Cornyn isn't someone that Texans have ethical issues with. Cornyn isn't a Republican that Texans wanted to throw out of office prematurely because they didn't believe that he was credible enough to hold public office. John Cornyn is a name that people here have been voting for decades. They trust him inherently. Ken Paxton has a real trust issue, not with Democrats, not with moderates, with his own party. The baggage that this guy has is going to sink Republicans up and down this state. It's not just the top of the ticket you have to worry about with Paxton. It's the down ballot. If there are congressional seats that end up flipping in November that Democrats are trying to flip, that Republicans currently hold, if they do that, it's in part because Paxton has no coattails, that they're going to spend every single dollar just clawing, trying to keep Paxton in this thing. It's going to have a down ballot effect. It's going to be a huge negative. And if you're James Tallarico, and if you're the DSCC right now, you are licking your lips, chomping your bit. This is an ad maker's dream come true, having Ken Paxton as nominee.
Kurt, before I let you go, I want to get your thoughts on the long-awaited DNC report that was released on the public to the public on Thursday. The autopsy received criticism for being poorly written, somewhat disorganized, but listed a variety of reasons for Trump's win in 2024. At this point, how much should the public or political strategists like yourself care about this report?
Well, the public won't care at all. They have no idea that these things even exist because they're too busy just trying to get their kids to summer camp on time right now here. But I think for the consultant class, I mean, this really is the issue here with Democrats. The consultant class seems to learn the wrong lessons from success as they did in 2020. The fact that it took this long to get this thing out there in the first place doesn't embody confidence. The fact that the report itself was not in what I would call final form makes me wonder what the heck did DNC even pay for this thing for, because it really doesn't provide us any insight that we didn't frankly already have right now. And again, if Democrats want to figure out how they can bridge the gap between where their values are and the disconnect with the working class, how they can get what they have on the coast here in middle America and in red states like Texas and learn how to flip them, you got to start talking to people outside the Beltway. Start talking to people whose minds you want to change. Talk to the people who live there and find out where can you meet them. The only way to change minds is if you meet people where they are. And I guarantee you, most of those people, most of those voters, they aren't in New York. They aren't in D.C. They aren't in L.A. They're just living normal suburban, what I call suburban dad life. And like I said, just trying to get your kids to and from places on time, trying to afford, the extracurricular activities and the grocery bill and the gas bill. You got to meet them where they are. And Democrats need to do a better job of doing that.
All right. Thank you, Kurt Bardella. Up next, a new historical documentary that is relevant today more than ever. And later, did you know that Memorial Day originated in the immediate aftermath of the American Civil War? I'll tell you about it later on Politics Nation.